So, can Canada claim to be a defender of human rights, not just here but around the world, while still doing billions of dollars in business with the Saudi regime? Alex Neve is the Secretary General of Amnesty International Canada, and he's with me now. Mr. Neve, good to see you again.
It's good to be here.
How's the Prime Minister handling Canada's response to the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi?
I think it's pretty clear that the Prime Minister has been uncomfortable, has been uncertain, has been wanting to do the right thing. I think that's clear, as has been the case with Minister Freeland. And I think we've seen that from other governments as well. But they're all stuck with the fact that Saudi Arabia is this country that no one wants to take on front and center, where there's all sorts of other considerations which push governments, including our own Prime Minister, to be a little mild, be a little indirect, not be as forceful as we might be with other governments, and I think we've been seeing that play out.
What's the calculation? It would seem, and it's interesting to watch this story from day to day because the facts of the story change and what happened to Mr. Khashoggi, and the questions keep coming for the Canadian government response. And the Prime Minister's calculation seems to be that he's quite aware of Canada's position on human rights and his personal position on human rights and the possible economic consequences of canceling this, which was billions and now billion, and now maybe it's billions is the new language today. So that seems to be the calculation he's dealing with. What do you think the calculation should be?
There's no price tag on human rights, and there certainly is no price tag on possible complicity in war crimes in Yemen, which, of course, let's not forget that when it comes to the armored vehicles, the concern is Yemen. Obviously, the context in which the debate is playing out is this fiasco and great tragedy around Jamal Khashoggi's death. But this is all about Yemen, and Saudi Arabia's responsibility there for horrific war crimes is beyond question, so there can be no price tag there. I don't think we yet have the kind of transparency that I'm confident really give us a sense of what penalties there are or are not. We've heard 1 billion, now we're hearing several billion.
Lots of secrecy around the deal.
An immense amount of secrecy, and I think Canadians need more information there so that we can confidently follow the truth there, and also that people who may have some expertise, lawyers and others, can perhaps provide some analysis that provides a different way forward.
One of the options for the Canadian, certainly the option of at some point, if we think that's where we are, of cancelling the deal and paying whatever the billions in penalties are. The other option the government talks about is reviewing and for the moment freezing export permits that don't allow for the moment suspend the deal, I guess. If that's where we land, you know, perhaps a temporary suspension of export permits, is that good enough?
Well, it's obviously an important first step. Temporary is temporary, but at least it does offer something right now. I think what would be key would be what kind of review happens during the period that the permits are suspended. What we obviously would want to see is that then becomes extended to something more permanent, unless there's a very dramatic and substantial change with respect to how Saudi Arabia is handling itself in Yemen. But I don't think that is at all on the cards at this point in time.
What do we know? So you've rightly pointed out that the sort of flashpoint for this conversation has been the death of a dissident Saudi journalist. But what do we know about what the Saudis are doing with those Canadian armored vehicles? Do we have clear information about how they're being used?
We don't have clear information. There certainly have been videos and other kinds of reports that have come to light. Last year, you may recall, there was quite a controversial instance where footage emerged of previous armored vehicles, so not part of this deal, and actually a different company even, being used in a policing action in eastern Saudi Arabia, so not in Yemen itself, where it certainly seemed that civilians were being hurt as a result of the actions of those armored vehicles. The government did carry out a review of that instance, and they felt it absolved the Saudis. We've had very serious concerns about the nature of the review that was done. It wasn't an independent review, it was done within the department, and have urged the government to have a more thorough review so that we can start to get better answers to that question.
What's your simple and straightforward recommendation, advice to the Canadian government?
stop the deal and do everything possible to ensure that any penalties are avoided or are minimized. At the end of the day, if there are penalties, recognize that that's an unfortunate price to pay for having gotten into a deal that we should have been smarter about in the first place, and at the same time explore what other options there may be to deal with any resulting job losses. There have been proposals made that perhaps the Canadian military could step in and buy some of these armored vehicles, pursue other contracts with other countries. We cannot let those considerations keep the people of Yemen hostage to war crimes.
All right, Alex Neve, Amnesty International Canada. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.